Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Chadvocate channel. Just want to go over a few things that we're going to be talking about today. So, first, we're going to be going over the Justice Department official who drafted a letter of resignation to Donald Trump on January 3rd because he believed that Jeffrey Rosen, who was the acting attorney general at the time, was going to be fired, and somebody who was going to be put in place was going to be essentially a Trump sycophant. So we'll take a look at Trump's unconstitutional use of the Department of Justice. We're also going to take a look at the unruly passenger on that Frontier Airlines flight, just to have a little bit of fun at his expense. But honestly, he can go to hell. He seemed like a real prick. Then we're going to take a look at the polling data and analysis from Pod Save America. They are organizers, and they are really just trying to get Democrats elected. It's more of a liberal take on things. I align pretty closely with their views on electoralism, meaning how to get people elected. We need to have a cohesive message. So we'll take a look at that. And later on, hopefully we'll have some fun and take a look at Paulytoons, which I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but a few Joe Rogan clips. Justice official accused Trump of using DOJ to push election fraud claims in draft resignation letter. House investigators have interviewed a former Justice Department official who drafted but never sent a resignation letter over what he said were former President Donald Trump's direct instructions to use department to support his false election fraud claims. Patrick Havakiaman, we'll just go with Pat, Chief of Staff to then Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen, wrote the resignation letter January 3rd in anticipation that Rosen would be fired in an extraordinary meeting that day with former president at the White House. This evening, after Acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen repeatedly refused the president's direct instructions to utilize the Department of Justice's law enforcement powers for improper ends, the president removed Jeff, this was then hypothetical, from the department. And then the last part I really want to just point out here is then the Justice Department cleared the former officials to provide testimony about their interactions with Trump, declining to invoke executive privilege. Now, if you remember, Trump invoked executive privilege a lot during the first impeachment. He was saying that all of his conversations with his staff, the transcript, all of that should be covered under executive privilege. It was not. Pretty much on brand for Trump, ultimately, trying to use powers that are really not intended for you to cover your ass when you are committing crimes. So, again, he thought that they should invoke executive privilege. Doug Collins, a lawyer for Trump, sent a letter in recent days to the former official saying that the former president wouldn't take any further steps to block the testimony, but in a Fox News interview Tuesday, Collins said he hoped they would abide by executive privilege restrictions, saying the former president still believes that those are privileged communications that are covered by executive privilege because, of course, he does. Now, this isn't very surprising, unfortunately. We have to keep talking about Trump. I want to get past him until he inevitably runs in 2024. Again, this really isn't very surprising. Trump was using the Department of Justice basically as his personal lawyers. He believed, he would keep calling them my Justice Department throughout the entire 4 years he was president. They are not his Justice Department. And it kind of shows the glaring problem when you have an executive that appoints the head of a department that is supposed to be separate. These were gentlemen's agreements that nobody would really cross these boundaries, but when you get a Democratic arsonist like Trump in the White House, he doesn't really abide by any sort of rules. So some of the things that the Justice Department were doing clearly before any of this came out. A few months ago, the Department of Justice subpoenaed Apple's records of Democratic lawmakers' phones, Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, their aides, and even one of their kids. Barr continued to pressure the prosecutors to keep looking into these records after nothing came up. This is the real kicker. They were investigating leaks. The Trump White House that leaked like a sieve was investigating leaks on the Democrats' part, which is just hilarious. It's just comical to me. If he was in a boat, they would be up to their necks in water with the amount of leaks that White House had. A little bit of wiretapping going on some political rivals. We'll just say we're investigating some leaks. So that reasoning brought me down to a Politico article, which is big eye roll and big side, the bastion of political thinking, Politico.com. But they did have a few interesting points in here, just comparing the first few months of the Biden presidency to, 6 months into the Trump presidency so far. So this time 4 years ago, the Trump administration had already burst its banks with sensational, revealing, and damaging leaks. Dodgy phone conversations, the Michael Flynn and Russia ambassador, Sergei Kislyak was leaked, an executive memo was leaked about CIA black site prisons, It's almost hard to remember because there was so much going on for 4 years that all of this happened within the span of 6 months. And it was that collective mindset that we were all looking around at each other. And it felt like 4 years had already gone by in the span of 6 months with that presidency. And that's what just makes it especially comical that he was investigating Adam Schiff and Eric Swalwell on the thin veil of Russian leaks, leaking information that his staff had contacts with Russia. Which the issue there isn't the leaking, it's the fact that his staff had contacts with Russia. I don't want to go down too far into the neolib mindset and Russiagate, even though it had turned up to be true by a bipartisan Senate committee that Russia did in fact interfere with the election. But let's not get wrapped around that axiom. I didn't really want to have to cover more Trump stories, but I'm sure that there's just going to be a flurry more in weeks, days to come as they continue to do the January 6th insurrection proceedings. So let's take a little bit of a lighter note and take a look at this unruly passenger on Frontier Airlines. I heard about this today and read brief things on it.
From that bizarre scene on a Frontier Airlines flight, where flight attendants strapped an unruly passenger to a seat with duct tape after he groped two of the attendants, assaulted a third. Will Reeve has the story. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, George. What a wild situation. The man had allegedly been drinking. The video of the incident is quite shocking. At one point, there's a thrashing physical confrontation. The largest flight attendants union in the country is now speaking out against Frontier Airlines and how it handled the aftermath of this, just the latest incident in the sky.
This morning, fallout growing from this disturbing flight fight, ending in a passenger being wrapped in tape. 22-year-old Maxwell Berry now facing charges, accused of unruly behavior on a Frontier Airlines flight from Philadelphia to Miami Saturday.
You guys suck!
Police say Berry had been drinking and groped two female flight attendants and assaulted a male flight attendant. Berry seen here swinging at the man, trying to restrain him.
He started raising his voice and cursing, and then I realized that he was drunk.
The flight attendants trying to get him under control, duct taping him to a seat. The passenger who shot this video saying the crew did the best they could in the situation.
The duct
They were very
taping.
professional, in my opinion. They had to restrain him because he was a danger for other passengers or himself.
Berry arrested upon landing now.
And the best they could do was duct tape? I mean, especially post 9/11, we don't have any better restraining methods than does anybody have any fucking duct tape? Well, again, it's Frontier Airlines. I don't know. Oh yeah, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did, Trin.
Now faces 3 counts of battery. But the airline under fire this morning for its handling of the crew members involved, saying in an initial statement the flight attendants had been suspended pending further investigation, claiming proper policies for restraining passengers had not been followed. Amid backlash from the union representing flight attendants.
What do they expect to be proper policy in that situation? The kid's throwing haymakers, you know? The only 2 people on the planet that are giving Frontier Airlines any shit have got to be his parents. Because nobody else gives it. This is everybody's nightmare. This is the worst possible scenario. I can think of a few others. In general, if the guy next to you is throwing haymakers and feeling up flight attendants, yeah, it's pretty much a nightmare flight. Being barfed on, that is pretty bad. Somebody shits their pants, that's terrible. Even if they tell me to sit down, I'd be like, you sit down. You have dinner with Mitch McConnell. You know, I'm not sitting fucking down. But yeah, if the guy's throwing elbows and shit, they really, United 93'd his ass and they all jumped on him. He should have to be duct taped to every flight now.
The airline revising its language to claim the employees are on paid leave. This caught on camera fiasco is just another in a spate of incidents with unruly passengers this year. In its new weekly report, the FAA counting more than 37...
America's a failed state. Look at these people. If they had planes during the Roman Empire, and, people start looking around like, things are getting pretty bad around here, this would be one of the first tipping points. Like, none of us can get health care, none of us can afford homes, and everybody's acting up on flights. Everybody's just completely stressed to the max, financially and on an airplane physically. People are losing their shit. We don't deserve nice things. You're right. We do not deserve nice things. We've shown that time and time again.
700 such incidents since January 1st.
What we have been saying since the beginning of January is that this new circumstance in aviation is simply something that flight attendants have not been trained for. If we don't get it together really soon across aviation and government, it is going to make people question whether or not they can come to work and be safe and whether or not they want to buy a ticket on an airplane.
Frontier says that it is supporting the prosecution of the unruly passenger. We reached out to Maxwell
shout out
Berry,
Newark.
did not hear back, George.
And Will, meantime, so many airlines this summer are still having trouble with cancellations.
Yeah, really. Spirit Airlines, especially 45% of Spirit Airlines
what a
flights
surprise.
today
What did he
have
say?
already been canceled. That's actually 45% of Spirit Airlines
45% have been canceled. They just say, "Oh, oops, you're shit out of luck. Go find another flight." And here's a $200 voucher.
today have already been canceled. That's after yesterday.
Yeah, everybody
60+
across the board
of their flights were canceled. At one point yesterday, only 20.
Just put in vaccine mandates. Just put in vaccine mandates for any sort of travel. I mean, they've cut back on their flights. People don't want to travel with these plague-ridden hogs. Just make vaccinations mandatory for travel. If you want to set foot on an airplane, show me your card.
25 Spirit Airlines flights in the sky. Spirit telling ABC News that an IT issue is to blame. We'll see if that gets resolved in any way today.
An IT
issue. Thanks very much.
So Max Berry's pretty emblematic of the United States at this point, I'd say. He's not anything new. Connecticut frat boy, I'm sure. Yeah, that's pretty terrible. I just feel bad for the flight attendants. I know he got charged with 3 counts of assault, but he should be charged with sexual misconduct. If he was groping women on the flight, and fuck him entirely. So this is my longer segment for today. And to anybody who hasn't ever seen or heard the podcast Pod Save America, they've been on since 2017. It is a bunch of Obama White House staffers, Tommy Vitor, Jon Favreau, John Lovett, who has his own podcast. Same thing with Tommy Vitor. He does Pod Save the World, a really great foreign policy podcast and show on YouTube. I would highly recommend both of those. They're more moderate as far as lefties go. Jon Favreau has admitted that he came out for Elizabeth Warren, so shout out Jon Favreau. And their advocacy or chadvocacy, plug, and organizing is really important to keep Republicans out of office. And the messaging might not be what we like to hear. It's one of the reasons I started the channel, because even though I would like to advocate for more progressive policies, none of that's going to happen unless we win elections. So one of their main focuses is to win elections. I believe in this episode, they do a little bit of polling data on how to retain the House in 2022. And as we've seen, I know I covered yesterday, the Ohio 11th District, that a more moderate Democrat won. I think it's going to be reflective nationwide that a more moderate policy agenda is going to keep us in power. And that is the first and most prevalent thing we need to do at this time. As I've stated many times, we do need to push from the left. Hopefully, Nancy Pelosi doesn't stick around much longer. We need to get rid of the geriocracy and continuously pressure them by having elections and primaries like we did in Ohio's 11th District. The neoliberal establishment doesn't start to rest on their laurels. Ultimately, if we go down swinging, we go down fighting on the progressive side, we can't do the Bernie or bust. We have to still push for the blue, even if they are just a moniker better than some Republicans, which you could definitely make the argument for. Ultimately, you have to weigh the options. Who is actually going to cede to political pressure from their base? And the Republicans are not listening to us. And if they're ceding pressure from the right, it's only going to get much, much worse very, very quickly. So in order to fix these problems, even a slower roll is better than losing elections.
Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Dan Pfeiffer.
All right, let's get to the news. Just last week, we were debating on this very podcast whether President Biden should come out in favor of vaccine requirements, which the White House had been hesitant to do. All that changed on Tuesday when the president not only urged cities and states to require proof of vaccination for restaurants and other public spaces, he also called out Republican governors who've banned businesses and schools from requiring vaccines or masks. Here's a clip.
If some governors aren't willing to do the right thing to beat this pandemic, then they should allow businesses and universities who want to do the right thing to be able to do it. I say to these governors, please help. But if you aren't going to help, at least get out of the way of the people who are trying to do the right thing.
So when we talked about this last Monday, Tommy and Lovett argued that Biden himself using the bully pulpit to push vaccine requirements might risk further polarizing the issue. I disagreed. What do you think?
Should I say you're both right or should I say you're both wrong?
I mean, the hottest take would be that we're both wrong, and then you can just slide right in there as the right one.
I think I don't know whether you're both right or you're both
Not
wrong.
it's not the most collegial answer, but it's the hottest take.
That's the goal, right? Is
Right,
the hottest take.
That's what we're doing.
Tell Elijah to get this clip ready because it's gonna be searing hot take. No, in all seriousness, it is definitely going to polarize the idea of vaccine mandates more. But I think that is also a risk worth taking. I don't think there's...
Well, everything Biden does, if he steps up to a microphone, it's the classic Obama tactic where just say the opposite, polarize the country even more. It was a winning strategy in 2010 when the Republicans took the House, in 2016 when they won the presidency. Just polarize and divide. It's a winning strategy. To be trepid about doing the right thing because it might polarize, that ship has sailed, my friend. Continually pressure Biden to do the right thing, and I think has moved towards that and is still moving to do the right thing.
Another choice. In an era of negative polarization, Joe Biden speaking about anything will polarize it in some way among Republicans, right? If Biden were to come out and announce that he has decided the grass is green and the sky is blue, there are going to be some of the Republicans who are going to switch their opinion and think the sky is green and the grass is blue. Like, that's just the world in which we live. But he should do it because it's the right thing to do. These governors are killing people. I mean, it seems like a horrible thing to say, but people are going to die because of this. People are going to get sick because of it. People are going to lose their jobs because of it. Kids are going to miss out on school and have their education messed with because of it. And he should absolutely call it out because the people Joe Biden is right on the science. He's right on the medicine, and he is right politically. In these states, the majority of people agree with Joe Biden about mask mandates and vaccine mandates and those situations. But so he should absolutely call it out so that the residents of those states know whose fucking fault it is that this is happening. It's not Joe Biden's fault. It's not random unvaccinated people going around. It's a bunch of Republican politicians who are doing performative cruelty on behalf of a minority of their citizens who have a disproportionate amount of political power. And I am very worked up about this. It is because you know who was being, this may seem obvious right now.
I think we're
the people who are at most risk because of this
bullshit
are the kids who have no choice about being vaccinated. They're all going back to school. They're all at much greater risk. And there's obviously lots of questions about whether kids get it as often or they get it as bad, but that's not even really the point. Is that by your choice to not get vaccinated, it's not just about you deciding to put yourself at risk. You're putting everyone else at risk, and you're putting children at risk. And I think the children aspect of this, the risk that people are putting in kids, should be pointed out more because
this is one of the only times I'll see the think of the kids argument because it might kill them. Not the think of the kids morally with the moral outrage, satanic panic, critical race theory, but think of the children. This one might actually get the children killed, and they don't give a shit.
That's what's coming to Florida schools. These kids are all going to go back to school in many cases without a mask mandate because Ron DeSantis said they can't do it, even if you are a school or a city who wants to do the right thing. And so Biden calling that out as the right thing to do, I think it could in some ways it might polarize it some among people who already feel this way, but it could put political pressure on them to do something different.
It's like Dan Pfeiffer's videos, a little grainy.
Yeah, my view on this is that I care a lot about polarization and persuasion when the goal is to try to get votes. We're not trying to get votes right now. We're trying to get shots on arms, right? So the persuasion thing has run its course. The goal is to get shots on arms. First and most importantly, vaccine requirements save lives, and they work. There's consistently 6 to 7% of people in polls who say that they will not get the vaccine unless they are required to, and then if they're required to, they will. That translates to millions of people nationwide. France did this, and as soon as they announced a vaccine requirement, millions and millions of people signed up in the next 48 hours. It worked.
I think we just
we
just need a mask mandate.
Are popular.
Or not a mask mandate.
A poll of 20,000 adults mandate in June found that 64% support a requirement that everyone get vaccinated, including 45% of Republicans. It is an issue that divides the Republican Party. 70% of all voters support a requirement for air travel, and 61% support a vaccine requirement for schools. Second, even if they weren't popular, or even if they cause a huge backlash from the right-wing media ecosystem, I would argue that this would still be good politics for Joe Biden, and here's why. The White House has understood since day one that voters' top priority is killing the pandemic and reviving the economy. And this is how you kill the pandemic. And I don't think you can crush the pandemic without a vaccine requirement at this point. Persuading vaccine-hesitant Americans will only get you so far. and it will definitely not get us anywhere close to herd immunity, which we may never reach anyway at this point. But vaccine requirements at this point are our only chance. And again, vaccine requirements are giving Americans...
Well, just talking about herd immunity with
choices.
Charlie
You
Kirk
got 3
yesterday
choices.
was talking about how people
one,
who have already
you
been
can
sick
get a
have possible
free,
herd immunity.
safe,
But
life-saving
I think
vaccine.
they've come out conclusively to say
2,
that only
you can pay out of your pocket
works for
to
about
get
6
regularly
months.
tested. You got 3 choices. 1, you can get a free, safe, life-saving vaccine. 2, you can pay out of your pocket to get regularly tested and wear a mask, perhaps for years, indefinitely. Or 3, you can stay home. Those are your 3 choices. The choice that you don't get is to endanger the rest of us by going out into public places unvaccinated.
Plague-ridden hogs.
That's your choice.
Just get vaccinated.
It is just, the conversation around this is so wild. It's like no one has stopped to think about it for 2 fucking seconds. You know what's not revolutionary or new? Vaccine requirements. Kyla starts preschool this week. You and I have to go to her doctor and get her doctor to sign a piece of paper where it says she's been vaccinated against a whole bunch of diseases that have been controlled for decades. Yet, a whole bunch of people think they have a right to get on a fucking airplane unvaccinated for a virus that is raging across the country right now. If you go to college,
this has
require
been decided
vaccination.
since 1904.
Right? It is just absolutely wild. You do not have unlimited freedom, right? There are privileges and requirements of citizenship. There's a reason you have to wear a seatbelt when you're in a car, or you have to wear a helmet if you drive a motorcycle, because your freedom to choose that costs us
Just
all
do
this
whatever
money
the hell
because
you want.
end up getting injured, killed, ending up in the hospital. There are requirements.
It's a classic positive or negative freedom. You know,
you're right. If you want to stay home,
I want the freedom from the virus.
You can do that,
and you want the freedom to spread the virus and catch the virus and die from the virus
on an airplane.
And
or,
at some point,
frankly,
you got to
even a
weigh
bottle
which
of
one is more
water through
important:
the airport security
the
these
positive
days.
freedom of
And
being
so
free of a plague, or the negative freedom being free from the government
This keeps being
restrictions.
treated in the
It's not a
conversation around it
contest.
as if this is some crazy thing that was just invented by George Soros and a bunch of Hollywood elites. It has been the common way in which we have done things since vaccines were invented. And it's not radical to do it now.
It's not. And Democrats should not shy away from this. I lean into this fight. Do not accept the Republican framing here that this is some fucking federal government mandate, blah, blah, blah bullshit. We're the ones offering people a choice. Republicans are not offering people the choice to live in a country where it's safe to be in public. That's the difference.
Do you know what's big government authoritarianism? Governors telling local cities and schools that what they can teach in classroom or whether kids have to wear masks or not. That is not freedom or individualism.
Kids
that is
are stupid.
Big government authoritarianism.
They'll think what.
I
wouldn't be surprised.
Which brings us to these Republican governors that Joe Biden was talking about.
Being a dumb kid myself, that's exactly what I would think. You know, it's going to be the zombie apocalypse. It's going to be the T virus. Well, they might have played Resident Evil 8, but they don't know what the T virus is anymore from Resident Evil. I wouldn't be surprised.
21,000 infections.
But also what they were saying before about Republicans never have a plan. Conservatives never have a plan. When they said they had a healthcare plan, they never did. You know, how to get the vaccines rolled out to people or even to take the vaccines, there's no plan. Trump left it up to the states. How to revitalize the economy is just an old hacky plan of cutting taxes for the rich, which gives the economy a sugar high for a bit and then collapses because they concentrate wealth at the top and it never trickles down. It's either old hacky tricks or no plan whatsoever and just agitation for grievances' sake. It never works out, and I don't know why people just don't see through it. They never have any policy agenda.
Among children just this week, he had this to say to President Biden.
Joe Biden has taken to himself to try to single out Florida over COVID. This is a guy who ran for president saying he was going to, quote, shut down the virus. And what has he done? He's imported more virus from around the world by having a wide open southern border. Why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you.
Hold on, Ronnie. Let's see COVID cases in fucking Florida right now. Let's see the percentage spike. Would you look at that? Your state is absolutely riddled with COVID. And I didn't know that migrants from Mexico were swimming across the Gulf of Mexico to Florida to infect your disease-ridden state, Ron. So nice clapback there. While your entire citizenry is getting sick and dying because you're pushing false bullshit.
Thank you.
Now is the moment where I once again remind you all of the following Politico headline from March 18th, 2021. How Ron DeSantis won the pandemic. Dan, tell us how he did it. How did he win this pandemic? By having record hospitalizations, record COVID cases.
Oh, God, the ripping Politico.
Months into
That's exactly
the
what I was talking
vaccination
about
campaign.
before. The bastion of
Must
political
we
thought.
insist on making
Politico.
all the same mistakes over again? Right. This is
right.
It is like
Right,
this is Ron DeSantis didn't win the pandemic. What happened was Republicans spent decades convincing the mainstream media that they had to swerve out of their way whenever there was a chance to possibly say Republicans were right and Democrats were wrong, and they put up a giant fucking journalistic mission accomplished banner in Florida long before the virus was crushed. It's just absolute stupidity. And I mean, like that, like we make these jokes all the time. That's just like Fox News right-wing media Mad Libs, right? Joe Biden, border people. Joe Biden's importing COVID across the southern border. What the fuck are you talking about? It's spreading in your state, which I would mind you is not on the border. You are surrounded by water unless you are worried about people coming in from Georgia and Alabama, right? Like, it is just so stupid.
Exactly.
Everyone's like, "Yay, what a smart thing to say."
This is a Fox thing now, and it started showing up in some polls because they've done some polls on like who is to blame for the rise in COVID cases, and the majority of Americans say the unvaccinated. But then when you look by party split, many Republicans, if not a majority of the party, I can't remember the poll, now say that foreign travelers or foreigners from into the United States are responsible for the rise in COVID cases. And sure enough, on Fox, you see all the time what DeSantis is saying is that somehow it is this what's happening at the southern border and people coming in from Mexico that are bringing in COVID, and that's why we have rising cases now. That's the new conspiracy theory floating around on the right, which neatly ties together COVID denialism with
And Joe Biden's been pretty fucking bad at the southern border
attack.
so far.
This reminds me of when Tom Cotton, double Harvard graduate, in 2014 when he was running for Senate, threw out there the idea that ISIS was infecting undocumented immigrants with Ebola and sneaking them across the border as a bioweapon.
Yeah, real bank shot there. That's
the triple Indy of right-wing paranoia right there.
A real bank shot.
Jesus. I mean, it's not just DeSantis. Jen Psaki pointed this out at the White House briefing. 7 states have both a statewide ban on mask mandates and a prohibition on school districts from requiring masks in schools. And some states, as you pointed out, have even banned businesses and universities from requiring workers and students to be vaccinated. In Texas, a teacher can be fined if they ask a student if they're vaccinated or if they ask unvaccinated students to wear a mask. Unfucking believable. My question is, like, how does Biden crush the pandemic when governors of big red states like Florida and Texas refuse to require masks or vaccines?
He probably can't.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, what I think they are doing, and I think it's using the limited tools.
You just got to build a wall around Texas.
They are now working aggressively.
It's not the southern border. You got to build a wall on Texas. It's the northern border. You got to lock them in. You can't let them out.
That's probably how he does it.
Build it around Texas, and you got to build it around Florida. Or just, we got to wait till Florida falls off into the ocean.
Impose these vaccine requirements on their own.
And he has been using the bully pulpit, if you will, to raise concerns about Delta. And we've seen that is working, right? We are seeing record numbers of new vaccinations on a daily basis coming out of the White House COVID team. And so there was a group of people who were unwilling to be vaccinated prior to this, who now see the spread of Delta and are worried about it and are getting vaccinated. Now, that's not happening at anywhere near the rate we need it to, and it's certainly not happening with the sort of geographic diversity that we need it to. Because one of the problems we have is this right now, where COVID is the worst happens to be in the places that are least likely to get support from their local elected officials for mask mandates and for businesses to put in place vaccine mandates. And so this is very, very hard. It is like the Republican politicians are making it, they're screwing everyone because what happens in Florida and Texas affects everyone else in the country. But Biden's doing what he can do, but we should be crystal clear that it is limited. He has limited authority to do this. One thing that I think is interesting is that there was a report that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin was looking at getting a vaccine mandate in place for all active duty troops. Like that would go a huge way of doing it. You have sort of like every person vaccinated helps. a lot. And so you're going to sort of, there's not one thing that you can do to get it done, but there's lots of things that are happening that are clearly having
can just be contrarian for contrarian.
And I think part of the strategy in Biden's speech, calling out Republican
so many people
governors,
across the world
which,
are just
Biden doesn't tend to call out Republicans a lot, is to make it clear who's at fault here. And, sure enough, according to a new St. Pete poll in Florida, Ron DeSantis' approval went from 55-40 in May to 44-49 today. And you have to wonder if that has to do with the fact that his state is now seeing record COVID cases and hospitalizations, and people are not that happy with the way he's handling the pandemic. I don't know what else it could be. What do you think?
I think that's right.
Ron DeSantis doesn't give a shit about the people of Florida. He's just angling to run as Trump 2.0 in 2024. If Trump, dies, that's it. Or he finds something more profitable to do that'll make him more money than profiting from the presidency.
Certainly suffering from the fact that I think a lot of people in Florida and around the country thought this was largely behind us, that we were on a sort of inexorable path towards normalcy. And now we have taken a huge step back. It just in people's lives, right? People are putting, either because they have to or because they choose to, are wearing masks. Kids are going back to school. And I think there was a lot of hope that would feel much more normal, maybe no masks, maybe much less fear of COVID, the world in which one kid coughs and everyone is in a panic. If you've ever had to stick a Q-tip up your child's nose for an antigen test, that is a fucking horrible experience. And parents are having to deal with that. And so that's obviously affecting him. What that means for 2022 or his role as the 2024 non-Trump frontrunner, I think is a very different question. But in the moment, it is clearly hurting him.
We should also talk about how this latest COVID surge is maybe affecting Biden's approval. 538 has him at 50.6% average approval rating, which is the lowest of his presidency. And worse than that, Dan, Chris Cillizza says that Biden just had the worst week of his presidency.
I fucking
so I
read
don't know
that.
Where he goes from there.
I saw the headline. I didn't read the article.
Now, a Politico Morning Consult poll from this week also found that 67% of voters believe that unvaccinated people bear the blame for the rising COVID cases.
Yeah.
But to me, again, we just talked about DeSantis, the dip in Biden's approval still feels like people are cranky and pissed off that this fucking pandemic is getting worse again. They're not feeling great about the economy, and they're taking it out on the guy in charge, at least temporarily. I don't know. What do you think? Am I missing something there?
No, you're not. I think we should just,
I think
I
right.
would put this in the worry about everything, panic about nothing category.
Him moving away from progressive policies.
Because 50.6
and
is his lowest.
Hold on.
But I think
it's 2 weeks ago that he was going to get this bipartisan infrastructure deal passed. They agreed on it 2 weeks ago, and every day it's still nearing a vote. It's nearing a vote. It's nearing a vote. The Republicans are doing the same thing they do every fucking time. They're running the clock out. And I don't know how somebody who was vice president for 8 years with Barack Obama doesn't see the strategy that they're doing. So just scrap it. Scrap the bipartisan infrastructure deal so Politico and their accolades, their ilk rather, give you, a big pat on the back for doing something bipartisan. Fuck it. Just do something. You got it. Just pass the reconciliation bill. Compared to $3.5 trillion you want to spend on the reconciliation bill, the difference between $4 trillion and $3.5 trillion to the average American is bunk. Nobody cares. They just want to see that their bridges aren't going to fucking collapse. But all of these campaign promises that he had, and he's just dragging his feet for what? For Politico? Nobody cares. If they don't vote on it by the end of next week, scrap it. It ain't worth it. We've wasted the summer on this. You got the COVID package passed, but he's now wasting ample time during the summer. If you passed a reconciliation bill with no Republican votes, nobody would have noticed. They wouldn't have been like, yeah, that sounds really good and all, but were there any red ties that voted for that? Oh, so you're telling me that there's going to be more money coming in to revitalize my community? That's why when Republicans step into office like Trump did, and the economy's good, they attributed it to him. They just go on their feeling at that moment.
Highest was when you get right past the first week after inauguration was 53. He's been in a very narrow band the whole time. There's been a lot of attention on this morning consult poll, which showed this huge drop for Biden. But that poll had his approval rating at 62, which was 10 to 11 points higher than what his average was at the time. And this is a pretty typical thing that happens in media polling, is you get this giant outlier that makes things look rosier than they are, and then you get a normal poll, and all those coverages like, how did Biden lose 10 points in a week, as opposed to the reality is your poll was wrong. And it works the other way too, right? Where it's, you get an outlier on the low side, and then it's like, come back kid, because it comes back to the average. But underneath the overall approval rating, to your point, there are some troubling, or at least concerning trends worth looking at. In a different Politico Morning Consult poll, there's 59% of people blame Biden's policies for inflation and the rising cost of things, as opposed to just people who's returning to normal. And that includes 41% of Democrats. And so that is there was a lot of dismissing of inflation concern, the political concerns around inflation a few months ago. That seems to be pretty real politically, at least. And maybe inflation
I've got to
will
look
come
more
down
into what is
as time
causing
goes
the
on. We don't
inflation.
know. But right now, it's a problem. And your point on
That might be my
COVID-related
research doc
pessimism is
over
the Navigator
the
research
weekend.
folks have a poll out this morning. And they have this really interesting question where they ask people, is the worst of the pandemic ahead of us or behind us? And the number of people who think the worst of the pandemic is ahead of us has gone up double digits among all groups since their last poll. And which also makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you were to just teleport yourself back a few weeks and read the press coverage, it's like hot vax summer, every return to normalcy, vacations, birthday parties, people are at baseball games, and now things feel very different. And maybe some of that
pretty lukewarm vax summer right now.
That's right.
Lukewarm at best, Dan. Lukewarm at best.
Is it even lukewarm? I don't know.
No,
but
getting colder.
It's a fair question about whether particularly vaccinated people's concerns outstrips the reality of what they should be concerned about. But that concern is real.
But again, I think the Biden theory of the case since the beginning has been crush the pandemic. That helps revive the economy. That puts people in a good mood. That is our best chance to govern and be successful in this
But he
administration.
forgot how
and to
stupid
potentially be
Americans can
reelected
be.
again in 2024. I think that is correct, which is why, going back to our original conversation,
Well, we could see this coming
that
right
just
when he
getting
didn't
more
reach
people
when he didn't reach his goal for the 4th of July because vaccinations were lagging. We could tell this was going to happen back in July, that the fear campaign of the right was working, ultimately. The disinformation campaign was working, because when you're fighting a pandemic for herd immunity where you need 70, 80, 90%, if you can break off that insane base, we all suffer. So it was a very low bar of misinformation they needed to spread to the populace writ large. And right around July, we could see that was starting to come to fruition.
DCCC Chair Sean Patrick Maloney recently told his most vulnerable incumbents that if the election were held today, they would lose the majority. His prediction was based on new polling that showed Democrats falling behind Republicans by 6 points on a generic ballot in battleground districts. When asked about the data, the DCCC's executive director told Politico, "We are not trying to hide this." The story was specifically focused on concern over the party's message. What is that concern, and do you agree with it?
Well, first I want to just say kudos to Sean Patrick Maloney and the DCCC. This is the right thing to do.
It is,
right?
yeah.
I was thinking about
happy
this.
talk doesn't get you anywhere. Just saying,
I was thinking
telling everyone we're fine, we're gonna win, it's great.
This is why I like these guys.
Everyone,
Because even the progressives,
in, the party, donors,
just gotta be
activists,
real.
members need to be crystal clear about how steep a hill we have before us. And I was thinking back to, do you remember in 2010 when our friend and then White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs went on Meet the Press? And I think David Gregory was host at the time. And he asked Gibbs whether there was a chance Democrats could lose the House. Mm-hmm. And Gibbs said yes, which was a patently obvious thing. It wasn't likely at the time in which he said it, but warning signs were everywhere. I mean, unemployment was 10%. It was pretty possible that this could happen. Great. And the House Democrats went bananas on him. I think that Steny Hoyer held a press conference just to attack Robert Gibbs for it.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, it was brutal. They were so mad at him. And he was
sure Gibbs
right.
loved that.
Yeah. It was very contentious, if you will. There were a lot of meetings between Robert and the Legislative Affairs team around that time. But this is the right thing to do. People need to be aware of the challenge before us, and that's important. Now, the specific messaging question in this story, Debbie Dingell, who is a congresswoman from Michigan,
younger than I am now,
and I think one of the savviest members politically. She was a Democratic operative for a long time, the widow of Congressman John Dingell. She serves in his seat. She said our message is not breaking through, and that's exactly Right. That is what's happening. We've talked about this before. I think this is a megaphone problem, not a message problem. It's like people aren't, it's not that we're saying the wrong things.
Oh,
it's
go
that
to
people
hell.
are not hearing them because we do not
38.
have the apparatus to get to them. There is some good news on this, which is there was a report last week, I think, that Democratic groups were going to spend $100 million during the month
I found
of August
my first fucking ban. My only chatter.
around
I'm gonna have to ban.
bipartisan
It's
infrastructure
unfortunate.
deal and the
It's
jobs
really,
and family
really
plan
sad.
to communicate to
It's very
voters
sad.
about it. And so there is some cavalry coming. But yeah, people have every right to be concerned. Seems somewhat patently obvious that if the election were held today, we would lose the House because, for first, think about it this way. If Joe Biden's at 50.6, which is a very respectable and good approval rating for a president, and that's in a national poll that includes California, New York, et cetera. What do we think his approval rating is in districts that either Trump won or Biden did less well than his national numbers? And we know that generic Democrats underperformed Biden in these districts. And so this is somewhat obvious, but it's important to say it because everyone needs to be aware of
But the real shit kicker is, even though, like, let's say we even lose the House, in an aggregate fashion, if we tallied up all of the Democratic votes for the House of Representatives and all the votes for the Senate, we win that popular vote every time. So that's why this conversation, and we need to have this conversation now, without election reform and putting an end to gerrymandering, it's basically moot. It's a root issue that we need to get at. It looks like we're not going to move on.
Work ahead of us.
I do agree that we're not breaking through with our message. I sort of always agree with that. It's very hard to break through with the message. We've talked about that a million times. I sort of wonder if it's more of an economy problem, a general mood problem, than it is a message problem. And I wonder that because of a couple things from this polling. You know, they said that both the American Rescue Plan and the American Jobs Plan in this polling are incredibly popular with swing voters in battleground districts, right? Not just like base Democrats. People love these plans. And yet only 42% of the people in these polls, battleground voters, trust Democrats on the economy. And so, and they also, and Debbie Dingell said that when she goes home to Michigan in her district, people said that Democrats aren't doing enough to boost the economy. So clearly, it seems like there is some financial concerns around the country, economic concerns around the country, and people don't feel the economy is where it should be, and they don't see Democrats doing enough to fix it. Now, partly that can be solved by, better messaging and spending a lot of money delivering that message to voters and saying, "Oh, look, we are doing a lot to help you. Here's what we've already passed, and here's what we're fighting for now." I think that's a necessity. But I wonder if it doesn't truly get fixed until the economy gets fixed and things are going well and people say, "Oh yeah, now I feel like I'm doing better in my own life and I'm looking around the economy and things are good."
But you need
I don't know.
You need to inject capital into
Joe
the
Biden mailed
economy.
$1,000 check to tens of millions of people, and it didn't affect his approval rating. That does speak to the limits of what else are they going to do that's more popular? Like the stuff in the.
But Americans forget quickly.
No, I guess what I'm saying
We
is
forget we're like flies. Or goldfish. Well, flies just die in a day. And if you're in Florida, you might be a fly because of Ron DeSantis.
I think that,
but
one thing you keep seeing in these polls.
yeah, we're goldfish. We have a 3-day memory just based on the news cycle and everything. Just trying to keep your head above water in a hyper-capitalistic economy like
which
this.
is something Joe Biden has
We
very
have
little control over.
we have to
Almost
forget.
Yeah, no, that's the challenge.
So yeah,
That's
just pointing
always
back
the
to
truth
something
of
he
the economy. The
did
president
by
gets
mailing
all the
checks
blame and all the
in
credit and has
the
almost
first few
limited
days of his presidency.
influence on what
Nobody's going to
actually
vote on that,
happens.
man.
I remember us watching bank default rates in Greece being a really relevant re-election factor for Barack Obama.
Hyper-capitalistic hellscape.
But
nickel and diming.
So you have a couple of
millennials
choices
to
here.
fucking death.
And I think we cannot leave this topic of keeping the House without pointing out that all of the messaging, billions of dollars in ads, would be less impactful than passing a one-page bill in the Senate that banned partisan gerrymandering. That's the biggest problem. And that is not the DCCC's fault. It's not Sean Patrick Maloney's fault. That's Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema's fault because everyone else is for that. They passed that. But if I had a choice between
just give them whatever they
$100 billion in Democratic ads between now and November, or passing the one-page ban on partisan gerrymandering about what would help us the most in keeping the House, it would definitely be the gerrymandering ban.
I completely agree with that, though I was sort of thinking about it from the other perspective, which is in a world, I don't want people to think that the reason that the House is in jeopardy is only because of Republican gerrymandering, even though that's the biggest reason. That if there were no gerrymandering, we would still see polls like this where the Democratic challenger or the Democrat is 6 points behind a Republican
these
in a
polls
battleground
really don't
district.
matter.
We have other problems to fix.
We're too far out from 2022. We're over a year out, and we're talking about the messaging strategy. That's true. Pod Save America does rely very heavily on polling data. It seems like it's an antiquated strategy, especially considering how far off the polls were in 2016 and 2020. They are just a snapshot in time based on the methodology that is given. I've never been polled either, because the people who don't answer the phone don't get polled. Even if they did try to call me, I'd fucking send that shit to voicemail. They need a new strategy to poll people. Overall, I think their strategy and their messaging is very helpful to the liberal cause, liberal, leftist, progressive, even though they're not exactly socialists by any stretch of the imagination, but they are of the mindset that no matter what we do, we're going to get called socialists. So they do advocate for more progressive policies. Okay, so I'm about to wrap up, but I do think we have time. I'll do one or two just magical clips that I think everybody should enjoy. I've never heard of this channel, Paulytoon. I'm sure it looks like it's been around for a while. If you've ever seen on Comedy Central, I think it was called like Shorties Watching Shorties. It's where they take comedian stand-up bits, they overlay them on a cartoon. So these are very short clips that this creator does, and I would highly recommend you subscribe. But these are great.
Who watched the fucking HBO thing about the Wallendas? The dude is going back to Puerto Rico. He went back to do what his grandfather died doing. Better yet, he took his mom to meet him halfway on the rope. It was on HBO Sports. They would practice without a net.
That is insane. The mother and the fucking son passed each other on the wire.
Jesus fucking Christ!
What a terrifying fucking
What
thing
makes
to
you
get
wake
good
up
at.
in the morning and go, I'm going to live on what? No. And here's okay. Laurie, listen. You want to go out to your yard and get a tree and tie it to the fucking rain gutter and walk across? I'm with you. But to go to Atlanta, check into a hotel and tie a fucking string across the street and walk across? Where? Where do you get your balls? Where the fuck did you get your balls from? Tell me.
I know where you got your balls from.
Where?
One of those veins looked like there was some thick blood in that
there's
one.
some big fucking nuggets.
Yeah, one of those veins looks like it did like it was a road that had been shut down in the 50s. There was just cars there.
I'm a veiny
covered in dust.
motherfucker, right, dog?
You're a veiny motherfucker.
All over.
Yeah, you are
Green ones
veiny.
and shit.
Yeah.
Fucking pumping and shit.
You're a very fiery man, Joe Diaz.
You know me, dog.
That's all the flavor going through your
Hey,
body.
dog, you know how we do it. Flavor, reefer.
You've had more nicknames than anybody I've ever met in my entire life.
I like Big Baby.
And they were the only ones that I ever allowed a man to have that are self-imposed. I've had friends that have tried to call themselves something. You're like, shut the fuck up. You're not the Black Hornet. I'm in Philadelphia, and I'm with my boy Tommy Jr. and his girl, and we get high as Jesus on the fucking space shuttle. We got down, Joe Diaz. We went deep. We just kept smoking.
We just fucking smoked this and didn't do shit to me.
What?
You got to break out the A weed when I come up here, dog.
What are you talking about?
Bro, that weed we just smoked. Don't do shit to me. If you make me drive 40 minutes up here, you got to get me stoned, bro. That's Susquehanna weed. I've been telling you about that shit.
Susquehanna?
Yeah, that shit don't do nothing to you.
You're so crazy.
It's
you
true.
You need to go to a doctor.
What the fuck, dog? You got to bring out some strong fucking weed, guy.
What are you talking
That shit
about?
don't
It
do
is
nothing
strong.
to you, dog. You got to bust out some good weed, dog. Look at my fucking eyes. Do I look high to you, guy?
Yeah, you look high as fuck.
Because I smoke on the way. Because I knew you were going to give me that Susquehanna fucking weed.
Joey.
You better start getting some good fucking
You
weed,
gave him
dog.
that Hannah Montana weed,
Yeah,
Joe.
that's the shit fucking weed you give me. That's the second time in a fucking row.
Yo, dude, you just
Cocksucker, I love
smoked
you to death.
train wreck.
And it was garbage. They
That
sold
is
you
not
on it. Look at my
garbage. You're
eyes.
so crazy.
That's garbage. You better
You're
start getting
so
some
crazy.
strong fucking
Look,
weed or go to a
okay,
different
Joey,
store. I
relax,
love you, dog.
Relax. I love you too.
I
But
love
you got to go to a doctor.
We're here, motherfuckers.
Brian,
Uncle
hold on.
Joey's
Brian, how high are you right now?
Bro, he gets
as
high on a
fuck,
fucking
right?
toenail.
Are you high as fuck?
High as fuck. Look at him.
How
If he
are
was
you?
high as fuck, he'd dial an ambulance.
Joey, please relax.
The biggest thing was that it was a tightly rolled joint.
Right,
And,
don't
and
do
he's
that.
used to
Come on,
huge
guy.
power hits where he's just feels
Who?
in his lungs. You are. You like big hits.
No,
You
I
like,
couldn't get a hit off it. It was too fucking tight. Mr.
Okay.
You know I love you to death, but you got to
Joey.
pack the 18 for
Okay,
Papa.
Joey. All you're doing is complaining about
I'm not
weed.
complaining. I'm just saying that I want to get high when I
I'm
come
not
up here.
complaining. Listen to what you're doing. That's complaining.
You invite me to your home and you give me the Susquehanna weed.
What the fuck is a Susquehanna? What the fuck are you talking
Remember
about?
those Susquehanna hat companies?
No.
Abbott and Costello, those cheap fucking hats. You got to bring the A-team here. Anyway,
What fucking planet are you from?
Yeah.
You are so fucked up.
You know what Susquehanna is?
I don't know what Susquehanna is.
Fugazi.
No more fucking late night podcast for Joey. No more. No more. You can't
I
handle
love
it.
you, dog. I haven't seen you
I love you too, but
So Philly has a cracked bell.
I think that's a good place to send it off. Thank you all for joining. Avoid the Susquehanna, that swag bullshit. I'll be back on Tuesday, 7:30. I'm gonna try to do a research document, do a little bit more of a deeper dive. But on the weekends, I'm gonna try to pick apart something that interests me, so we can do a deeper dive on it, my own research, my own synthesization of data, and come out possibly with a policy conclusion we can all agree on. And again, thank you so much for joining the Chadvocate channel.